Hello, everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. So, as promised, we are going to be moving right on along with the Bard's Guide. I apologize for it being late, but as I noted in my channel update video, things are in this bit of a state of flux around here, and keeping things on an even keel just requires just a bit more of my time and attention. And honestly, how can I really conduct myself otherwise? Another baby on the way, and I'm eagerly awaiting his arrival. But enough about that, I've already covered that. We are diving right into the Bard's spell list. And just as a note here, we're going to be skipping past the cantrips this time around. You get access to all of them, and their effects, while useful, are still minor-ish enough, and also should be familiar to most players by this point, that I feel okay with kind of moving by them. But if you want to look those up, they're easily found online. Just go to Google, look up the D20 Pathfinder system reference document, and you can find the Bard's character class as well as the spell list, and just go through and peruse to your heart's content. But for now, when we going forwards here from first level spells onwards, we're going to be taking a look at what are going to be the most mechanically effective, particularly with combat in mind. There's a lot of other spells in the Bard's spell list that are just really, really cool and have a lot of neat effects that, even though mechanically they may not be the most effective and certainly depend on a certain amount of role play and flexibility on your DM's part, I just really, really like them, but there's so many that we're going to limit ourselves to a number of really good ones that are really going to be helpful for our more combat-oriented build. So, to kick things off here, we have a classic in first level spell list, and that's Cure Light Wounds. It's a touch range, instantaneous effect. You heal the target for 1d8 plus 1 per caster level points of, well, health. You top out at a plus 5 there, so at minimum you're healing 6 hit points, you top off at 13. Well, it's the best healing spell pound for pound. It's great bang for your buck, and it's great for you to be supplementing healing, particularly after a fight. You don't really need to worry that much about healing mid combat unless you really need to keep someone in the fight. But this actually just works out really well and a lot better as a wand, but having it in your spell list is not that bad. Once you get to the higher level cure spells, cure moderate wounds, cure serious wounds, you definitely get more points for healing, more dice to roll, better bonuses, but in comparison to how effective they are with other spells of equivalent levels, it's just not that great. You're better off selecting other things. If you really need to heal somebody, yeah, you can pick that out in a pinch, but generally your spell list should be kitted out with other things that boost your skills, boost your combat effectiveness, boost your allies, debuff or deal damage to your enemies. Ideally, both of those things. So, Cure Light Wounds, definitely have it handy now and then, but really get yourself a wand of Cure Light Wounds. That way, you're not quite so dependent on healing with a relatively comparatively limited spell list that you have, especially in comparison to, say, druids or clerics or oracles, any full spellcasting class, really. But for a nice alternative here, we have Ear Piercing Scream. It's a close range spell, so that means it's 25 feet plus 5 feet for every 2 caster levels, and you can affect one target. This does have a fortitude save for partial effect, and spell resistance does apply here. You blast out a scream, audible only to your target, and you can daze the target for 1 round, which renders them unable to make any actions. They're not helpless, so there's no penalties to their armor class, but they can't move, they can't attack, cast spells, heal, whatever, use items. And you deal 1d6 points of sonic damage for every 2 of those caster levels. A successful save does negate the daze effect and halves the damage, but the fact that it's sonic damage is really nice because very few creatures have resistances to sonic damage, and being able to put an enemy out for 1 round at least is great, especially if you target an enemy spellcaster with this. Uh, and also consider that a lot of spellcasters don't have great fortitude saves, so even once you get up to more mid levels where a lot of full spellcasters really start to get dangerous, you can still have a good shot at affecting them with this. Hell, even once you get to some of the higher levels, right around 13th level, 14th, you can bust this one out there, scream at them, and render them unable to act potentially, and deal a decent chunk of damage to them in the process. But again, spell resistance is a factor to be aware of, and that can be a particularly serious problem to worry about once you get to those higher levels. Also, we have Aspect of the Nightingale. Now, this is only a personal effect spell, so it's a personal buff. Lasts 1 minute per level, so really, really nice duration on it. You gain a +2 a +2 bonus on performance sing checks and diplomacy checks. Once per minute, when you're hit with charm effects that allow for saves, you can roll twice and take the better result. So, getting a bonus on perform checks relating to sing, that's nice for your different bardic performance abilities. Not that a +2 bonus is nice, but it's not going to make or break things in most situations. And +2 on diplomacy is also nice, especially since you're already a great face character, have a good charisma score, and potentially have points in diplomacy, or are able to substitute one of your performance skills for the diplomacy skill. And this will also stack on top of that if you use Aspect of the Nightingale. But diplomacy is one of those skills where it's definitely roleplay dependent, and where your DM has much more wiggle room and ability to go, no, not really, that's not going to work, whatever diplomacy checks you make. The real benefit here is those charm effects that allow for will saves, because there's plenty of those out there, and those can be problematic even at higher levels. The ability to have this on you as a first level spell and getting to roll twice to take the better result against charm effects, that's awesome. This is a spell that's going to be useful for a long time. So definitely keep this one handy, especially since you are a spellcaster. You're a class that has all these other abilities. Being able to roll twice and take a better result means you can go out and use any of your other bardic performance abilities and be able to help other people make their saves against different charm effects. So definitely have this one in the back pocket. Incredibly useful. And moving along from that, we come up to Hideous Laughter. Once upon a time in Dungeons and Dragons, probably still in Dungeons and Dragons, known as Tasha's Hideous Laughter. This is another close range spell, so it's at 25 feet plus 5 every 2 levels. You affect one creature with it, and it lasts 1 round per level. Not bad. Not great, but not bad. Will save negates, and spell resistance applies here. You hit your target with uncontrollable laughter, causing them to fall prone. They won't be helpless, but they can't take any actions either, and they're prone on the ground, making them ripe targets for melee. Each round, the target is allowed to make another saving throw, however, to end the effect, and once the spell is ended, they can get up. Creatures with an intelligence bonus of 2 or less are not affected by this spell, and creatures of a different type than you, say, you're flesh and blood, mortal, humanoid, and you're trying to use this on, say, an angel, well, they're going to get a +4 bonus on it if they can be affected by it, because, and I quote, humor doesn't translate well. I love it. I think it makes sense, especially when you're talking about creatures of different types. If you're trying to use this on a dragon to make them laugh, yeah, I can definitely see that they'll have a certain amount of cultural resistance to it. I think that's fantastic. I think that's incredible. But it does hinder the spell a little bit. But still, getting them to roll around on the ground laughing, unable to do anything for several rounds, well, potentially several rounds, is awesome. Definitely not a bad pick at all. But what's a better pick, though, is Touch of Gracelessness. You touch one creature, endures for 1 round per level, Fortitude save for partial effects, and of course, spell resistance applies. You give a 1d6 plus 1 per level, maxing out at a plus 5, penalty to dexterity. You can't take it below 1, though. The target, if they move more than half speed, will fall prone. If they're flying, you drop their maneuverability rating by 1 step, so if they have perfect, they go to good. Good goes to moderate, etc., etc. A successful save halves the penalty to their dexterity score, and it negates the prone and flying effects that this spell otherwise has. The only real drawback to this spell is that you have to touch them, but that's not a huge issue for you. We are definitely keeping more at range, but if you if you get caught up in melee somehow, normally you're using your bow, you just reach out and touch them with the spell, and they take that dex penalty, then you beat a hasty retreat. Well, when they go to try to move after you, if they're trying to move more than half their speed, they're going to drop prone in front of you, where you can just keep plinking arrows into them. Flying creatures, having them be less maneuverable, having them have to take more of their movement, turning and moving back onto you, is tactically useful. It messes with their action economy. All of these different things. And also, a penalty to dexterity lowers their defense, their reflex saves, their initiative, potentially. Their touch armor class. So many things are impacted by dexterity that really it's only a relatively, comparatively small handful of creatures who are not dex dependent that will be affected by this. And hell, even those that are not dex oriented creatures, like say an ogre, doesn't have the greatest dexterity score, still hitting them with this to lower their dex even further, to stack these penalties on them and cause them to fall prone if they go running, is going to be massively helpful. Definitely an incredible spell to have. But an even better one, in my opinion, is Weapon Wand. You touch one weapon, lasts 1 minute per level, so great duration here. You open a space in the touched weapon to store a wand, and you're treated as if you're wielding both in one hand, or if it's a two-handed weapon, in both your hands there. You may either attack with the weapon or use the weapon as if it were the wand. If the wand's effect requires an attack roll, you can use your weapon's highest attack bonus that includes any bonuses it may receive. You don't get a damage bonus with it on the spell effect, however. Once the spell ends, the wand is ejected to a free hand if it's available. Otherwise, it drops to the ground. If the weapon is broken, the wand is broken. So definitely want to take some care there, but since we're using a bow and keeping back generally out of range anyways, this is awesome to have. I just picture a lot of touch spells like Scorching Ray, Disintegrate, all these different things, and especially since we have Use Magic Device, we can do a whole lot with this. I mean, using a bow with a Disintegrate wand stuck inside of it, hitting targets with that, hitting the terrain with that, that's awesome. That's a lot of fun right there, and a lot of power to have at your fingertips, especially since, say we manage to somehow get up to a +5 bow. That's a +5 bonus to your ranged touch attack using Disintegrate to hit a target. Or, if you're just melting the terrain, that's not as big of that doesn't take as much to hit. But any of these ranged touch attack spells, any of these spells that require an attack roll that you can possibly stuff into a wand and then cram into your weapon, that's going to be incredibly handy, a great utility spell to have here to enhance your overall combat abilities. So, definitely another one to have on your regular daily spell list, I would say. And another great spell that will help mess with your opponent's movement and their ability to affect things on the battlefield is Shadow Trap. It's a close range spell, again, 25 feet +5 every 2 levels. You affect one target, again, and it lasts 1 round per level. Will negates and spell resistance applies. You pin the target's shadow in place, entangling them and making them unable to move from that more than 5 feet from that particular spot. This also affects flying creatures, causing them to only be able to hover in place. The target is allowed to make full round saving actions to end the effect each turn, meaning even if they do save, their whole round is consumed right there. And that's going to apply for a lot of these spells in the Bard's spell list. This doesn't work on creatures that don't cast shadows, however, so a lot of vampires, different kinds of incorporeal undead. Shadow creatures in and of themselves, I would say, are still affected by this, but technically they are shadows. They're not casting shadows, so some DMs may say no, but in my mind, I think that this would work pretty well against them too. But any creature that does not cast some kind of a shadow will not be affected by this. So definitely something to bear in mind. And also, as a caveat to that, I would say if an NPC or say a player is caught in this and they decide to make clever use of spells that generate a lot of daylight to move or remove their shadow from the particular spot where they were pinned, well, I would say that if it doesn't end the effect immediately, at least would give them another save at an increased bonus, or at least that's my thinking on it. But it's burning a spell to end a spell effect, so I think there's enough of a trade-off there to make that argument without being too game breaking. But either way, this is a great spell to have, another great way to debuff opponents and keep them trapped in place, or at least limit their movement range. And really, a relatively still entangled target is a much better target for you to fill full of arrows. But this is the end of where we're at with level 1 spells, or at least ones that I would highly recommend that you pick up, or at least keep written down on your character sheet or notebook somewhere. Again, there's plenty of other spells that have incredible effects, like forcing a target to be unable to tell any truth, or to be unable to speak intelligently, kind of like what I'm doing a little bit right now at 3:40 in the morning. But like I said, there's so many out there that this particular video could run on a long time. Any of the spell guide videos probably could. But we're going to leave off there for now, and next time around we're going to tackle second level spells. And really, things only get better and better as we progress higher and higher in the different spell lists. So, with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. If you enjoyed today's video, go on down there, hit that like button, go into the comments and let me know what you thought. If you didn't like it, hell, still do the same, hit dislike. Let me know. I'm more than happy to engage in discussion and go over different spells, other things I might recommend to you. Certainly ask me. I'm more than happy to make my thoughts known, obviously. And also, in case you want to see more, there's going to be a couple of videos popping up over this way that you might enjoy. Or if this hasn't been your first stop and you've been liking the content here so far, well then hell, go on down there, hit the subscribe button. We'd be happy to have you here. Also, I should note that my wife has challenged me to embarrass myself. So, next video, I am going to have to engage in one of those most nobly bardic of arts, and I am actually going to try singing a little bit. I apologize in advance, but next time around, tune in if you want to watch me humiliate myself on the internet for complete strangers. Absolutely happy to do so. But again, with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.